setting up a search result source, connecting to managed properties, and getting our job posting to display using the SharePoint Search RestAPI. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So in the last video, we actually was playing around with a template. This is actually not our search results. Well, this is not the end result of the search result that we want to go with. We're just playing with a temporary template just to see the results set. And as of right now, the only thing we really have displaying is the title, though there's a lot of other information we want to display. And there's also a lot of information we do not want to display. We're just grabbing whatever the search results gives us by default. So if we come in here and take a quick look, let me refresh this. Let me hit F5 to go ahead and refresh this in the developer tools. And then let's just search on search. And then this is going to bring up the search API. And if we kind of drill down into this guy, remember how nasty this was. So I'm not going to harp on that. I think I made the point clear last time. But if we look at the primary query results and then the relevant results table and then the row count here. So what we're saying here is that, you know, though we have 10 items at a time, and then you look at our sales and you look at the result set, we have probably about 41 properties, right? There's 41 properties that we're bringing back and we're only displaying 2. So this is really a waste of data. So we're going to walk through how we clean that up. So the first thing we want to do, let's go ahead and create a result source. And the result source is almost like the search scope in 2010 and 07. And basically what it does is scope the results to a particular query, and it's a built-in query. So if there's a lot of logic, instead of replicating that logic, you can encapsulate that with a result source. So let's go there. There's a couple things I do want to point out. You can create a result source at the web level as well as the site collection level. We just want to make sure we're creating this at the site collection level because that's where we need it. We want this to be available for all sites. I've already went in and created one called DC Postings. So let's create this guy from scratch. And let's just call this job postings. And we want this to pull from our local SharePoint. You know, we don't have a federated or, you know, we're indexing external content or anything like that. So this is all within this SharePoint farm. So it's going to be local. And then we want the SharePoint results versus people results. And then in the query builder, this is where we actually want to specify how we want the logic for this query. So for the job postings, if we kind of go back, let me just copy this guy. And let's take a look at our job postings list. And basically what we want to do is just filter this out by the content type name. So let's just take a look here and confirm our content type name. So I'm just go to job postings here, go to settings. And then on the content type, that's our content type name, JP job post. All right, so I'm going to just copy that. And then here in the query filter, we want to go by the content type name and where it equals. And then we want to manually specify the name, and that's going to be the name, JP job post. And then we're going to add the property. One of the mistakes I made on initially was that when I selected content type and you select equals from this drop down, you get to say show all content types. And if you select this drop down here, you actually get a content type. I'm sorry, you get the job posting, the JP post content type within this list. And you can select that equals. And then if you add that property, the big difference is that we're trying to match the content type managed property against the content type ID. And obviously this is going to be a mismatch. It's looking for the friendly name of the content type versus an ID. Now we could do this if we wanted to map the managed property to the content type ID. We would have to go up here and select that explicitly. So content type ID and then map it to the content type ID that way. So that's one of the things that that tripped me up initially. And you can know if this is set up correctly or not by testing the query. So if you test the query, if you get results and you kind of eyeball those results and see that, yeah, that looks about right, I think we're good to go. So in our case, we are good to go. So let's go ahead and click OK here. And then we'll just go ahead and click Save. So now that's our result source. Now the way we're going to leverage this is in the REST API, you can specify the result source name. So let's just go here and let's go ahead and build this query using Yark. I love to test things out here before we kind of commit to them. So hold on, let me do this. So let me launch Notepad. Let's just dump some things out of my clipboard into Notepad. So that's going to be my result source name. And then I've already done the research and grabbed a sample of what the REST API call should be for search when you want to specify result name. So if we want to break this down a little bit, we're going to start with this. Let's just erase this and start off with, oops, I think I erased too much. Let's just erase this URL piece of this. And let me open this up a little bit so we all read it. Okay, and what I want to do, I'm going to come up here. I'm going to grab the root part of my domain. And let's go ahead and concatenate this REST API call. So it's really just going to be underscore API in search, right? Query text. We're going to do a star notation here, an asterisk, because we don't want to specify a query name or keyword as of yet. The row limit 10, that's fine for now. And then select properties. This is another guy that we want to use. One of the things I'm noticing is that the single quote seems to be a different type of Unicode. So I'm just replacing those to make sure that I don't have any unnecessary issue. Now, what this is doing, this is going by the source ID, and this is not what we want. So by default, if you do a lot of searches on how do you limit a search REST API by result source, you will see this sample a lot. This is hard to read, and it may not be, and it's not going to be scalable across environments, right? Because every time you create the result source, you're going to get a new GUID. So instead, what we want to do, we want to bring in this properties attribute. And this is different from managed properties. These are actually properties on the search object itself. And one of the properties that's available is the source name. And here I can go ahead and specify by user-friendly name, job postings, the source result name. And then you have to specify the source level. And in our scenario, that's going to be the SP site. So let's go ahead and try this. Did I get that name right? Let's see. Let's try it, and if we get an error, I'll just go back and confirm the name. All right, so I think we have everything where we need as of now. Let's just go in here and drop in our custom header, and we're going to go with our same old trusty OData verbose header and send the results, and we get a 200. So that looks good. And now what I want to do, I want to just spot check this guy and make sure that we actually have data. So I want to spot, I know we're bringing back title. So let's do a find on title. And that's result source title. We're not looking for that. There we go. So that's key title. And the value, yep. So we're actually looking like, yep, VP. So I think we're good to go. So let's go ahead and copy this guy, and let's dump this into our Visual Studio project. So all of our REST API calls are in the services layer. And what we want to do, I think we've already started a job posting. So that's the blog post. We're not looking for that. Featured jobs. Here we go, job results. So in this job results, the last time what we were doing, we were just going in here and blindly grabbing everything, and we were just kind of testing this out, right? So let's go ahead and replace this. Let's just comment this out before I just actually delete it, just in case we need to reference it. And let me paste this in and really just kind of build this up from scratch. So I have my site URL. That's going to give me my site collection root, so I can safely replace that piece there. And put the quote in and remove the /. And this is, for the most part, where we need. And you can see here, we're actually limiting down those 25, 40, whatever default properties that we get to down these 3. And we're using this special properties notation to get everything by result source. And you need that single quote, and then the double quote would kind of end that string for us, right? So all the green squigglies are gone. Setting the URL, everything else will remain the same. All right, and we can get rid of this. Let's yeah, let's leave this log here, so that way we can kind of see where we're getting back in the new format way, right? So we all talked about this last time, where this is the magic method that really kind of transpose that dictionary format to the JSON object notation that we're kind of used to, and we're just going to go ahead and execute that. So let's go ahead and send this up to the server, to the SharePoint form, publish that up. And now let's go in and just confirm exactly what we received. So let's go, I have so many tabs open here. Let's go back to the home page. And now I'm going to do a Control F5 to make sure I'm looking at the latest and greatest. And for the most part, this should remain the same, right? This should remain the same. Let's just confirm what we're getting here. Let's go to the network, hit F5. And if I do a search on, a filter on query, if I take a closer look at this guy, let's see what that request looks like. This is by title, path, and last, and then property, the source name is set to our guy, and that so far looks perfect. All right, so if we look at the results set, I can drill in that way, but I prefer to look at the nice, pretty code. So that's the title, the doc ID, the path, the rank, the original path, and we're still getting, this is interesting, we're still getting other properties. But I think some of these are still coming in because they're default properties that that we get by default regardless of the select. So let's just take a quick drill down here on the table and the rows, and then for each row, I mean, we're still getting our 10, and then if you look at each item, yeah, so we're only getting back 10 sales versus the 20, I forget what the number was it like 25 or 40 before or something like that. So, you know, definitely significantly less than what we were getting before, and our payload is still, is definitely lighter. And as you can see, this is our title. We have our title, our path, and our last modified, which is part of the request query here when we select the properties. Okay, so I think we're fine. So right now, what we did, we adjust the query to look specifically for job postings versus a general search query. So we did that. That's done. Check. And then the next one is that we limited the properties, which is great. The problem is that we're still missing a lot, right? So if we're looking at this guy here, and let's just kind of compare it to the other job posting tag. So for hot jobs, this is the query that's going directly against the list versus search. And I think we need to pull back the image, right, for the job post. We need to pull back the location for the job post, and the quick summary. So let's go ahead and grab those guys and have that information readily available in this results set. So in order to do that, what we will have to do, we actually have to tag team using the actual job posting list. So let's go ahead and bring up the job posting list. And what we want to do, we want to take a close look at the settings, the site columns, and their internal names that are currently being used. So we need the job summary for an example. And if we look at the job summary, that's going to be JP summary. And now what we need to do is that the way it works is that you have all these site columns on the list. When those get indexed by the search crawl, it actually creates crawled properties. So each site column will have a representative crawl property to represent that site column. And from that crawl property, you then need, from a search perspective, a managed property. And that's what you see in the result set. So when we did that drill down from tables to rows to sales, those sales were actually managed properties. And managed properties have different characteristics. And then we're going to touch on them lightly. We're not going to go too in depth, but light enough to understand that there's certain flags that we need based on the type of query that we're doing in our search. So now what we need to do is find for each site column its crawled property, and then from there the actual managed property, and that's what we're going to take a closer look at. So to look at that, we need to go to this gear icon site settings, and then we need to look at the search schema. And in the search schema, you will have a list of all the managed properties. So there are actually two views. So right now, by default, you're landing the managed property. That's this guy here. This is the name that's in the result set from our REST API query. And then from a crawled perspective, you have crawled properties. And you can see that you can have one managed property representing several crawled properties. And and you can map those in, and there's different scenarios why you want to have that. For any managed crawled property, you can click on that guy, and then it will give you the reverse insight that says, for this crawled property, it's associated to this managed property, and this managed property. So not only can you have a managed property with many crawl properties, you can also have one crawl property associated to many other managed properties. So you have this many-to-many relationship happening. Now, it becomes, and this is for some folks, very the confusing piece for search. And search is a tedious setup. So every time we add a site column, for an example, if it's a brand new site column, we're not reusing one that already exists, then there's a waiting period. You have to wait for this guy to get indexed, and then the crawl property gets created. And then by default, it will automatically create a managed property. But sometimes the default managed property doesn't have all the attributes that's needed. So then you need to remap it, so on and so forth. So that waiting period really adds a lot of tedious pieces to search solutions, but in the end, it's still extremely powerful. And in some scenarios, especially when you get out to SharePoint Online, a necessity because of the way things are kind of spread out. So for our intents and purposes, we've done a very smart thing, meaning that when we created our site columns for this solution, we prefix everything with JP. And because we prefix everything with JP, what we can now do is use that prefix to bring up all the crawl properties associated with the job portal solution. And this may be all. So if we stuck to our pattern and our best practice, everything that we need should be displayed here it seems like there were 16 of them just from a crawl property scenario. So now if we want to bring in the JP summary, that's going to be mapped to this managed property, and this is the name that we have to specify in our search query. So if you break down this search query, here's the query text, and that's going to be the keyword that we're searching against. And right now, that's just an asterisk. And then you skip the row. That's the number of items to bring back. This is the select property, so that's going to be your managed property, and this is going to be more so like the internal property or search property, and that's what we use for our source name. So if we want to add in job posting, the job summary, what I would do, I'm clicking on this guy, and I'm just copying that grayed out section and then adding this to my list in a comma delimited format. Okay, so that's going to bring in summary. Now what we want to do, we want to bring in the, what else do we need? We want to bring in the location. Location is another one. So let's look for a location. That would be JP location. Just click on this guy. And again, just copy this off, go to Notepad, add this guy in. And then we also need, let me bring this up here. We also need, so we have our location. All right, let's look at the finished product. That's this guy here. So that's the location. The full-time, so the job type, like if it's full-time, part-time, seasonal, whatever, we never added that to our schema. So that's something that we need to add later. This is the summary. So we already grabbed summary, location. We have title by default. And then really, I think the last thing that we need is, probably maybe active, right? And then the image, right? So let's go ahead and grab those two. So active is just going to say that this job post is active, because in the search results, maybe you only want to display active, right? So let's go ahead and grab this guy that's active and paste this over here. And then the other guy we want to grab is going to be the photo, and that's going to be the JP image. And then if the JP image, that's going to be this managed property here. All right, And it's going to be interesting to see how this JP image comes out. So let's go ahead and add this guy here. All right, and now if we collapse this all back together to a single string, minus the page, the line breaks, and let's just drop this into a Yark and just confirm this is working as expected. All right, so we got a 200. That's good. And let's do a search on summary. This is one of our new guys, and let's just see what the result set looks like. So that's our summary, and this is an example of the summary text. And yeah, so that so far looks okay, right? Let's do a search on image, and this is our image. So now we have the image tag. So remember how we had to, when we were going to get this against a SharePoint list, when we were doing that REST API call against a list, we actually had to make a double call, right? Because this is a publishing image, and you had to do a second call to get this image tag, and then we have a special internal method that will strip out this source value here minus the rendition ID, because we want control over that. And then return that back. So we're going to have to break that out a little bit. But the good news is that we have this, and we have this on the single call. So for each search result item, we don't have to make a second nested API call to get those images. So that's good. And what was the other one? The other one was location, Sacramento, and let's see what else we have in here. Cleveland, and that's part of the request. Detroit, New York. So okay, so we're looking great here. So I'm okay with the way this looks. So let's go ahead and copy this guy out, and let's see, we want to get this all the way up to the API call. And then there's a lot of tricks that we can play within Visual Studio, within our code, ourselves. I mean, we probably want to. It's probably easier if we break out these select properties, because that's probably something that will probably change probably more frequent than the other ones. But I think for now let's just leave this as is, and let's just paste this in. And what do we have? All right. And what we want to replace is everything. All right, we just replace this guy right here. Bring this down here, and that should be it. We got an extra double quote, and let's just comment this out. All right, and no, this should be the keyword that's being passed in. Let's save that off. All right, now let's just publish this up and see what we get. See what the result set looks like. All right, and let's go to the website. Hit refresh. All right, so I have my hot jobs, I have my query, but something's wrong here. It didn't like something. I bet you I fat fingered something in the results set. Rejected, no. Name not resolved. All right, let's look at this from a result set piece. I probably have an extra character in there. Let's see. Name not Oh, that's not right. Okay, so we have to pass in our host name. We're passing in the host name. Oh, we're starting with it. Would that screw it up? Let's try. We started with a /. Let me publish this out and see. Wow, something like that. Wow, that was misleading, right? So let me hit F5 here and see if this gets resolved now. Filter on query. Yes, okay, so we have a 200 and we are getting results. So let's kind of drill down here. Primary, relevant, table, rows, and then sales. Last time we had 10, so now we have 14. Okay, and if we scroll over here, yep, now I can see the new properties being brought in. So that's the location that's active. Okay, so I think we're okay. Now, let's see here. Let's see, our image tag is brought in, so that's going to be JP image OWS. So let's just copy this guy out because we're going to need this. So if we go back here, so now we have our results set. That looks good. Okay, so now that we have the result, we have SPD results here, and what we're going to have to do, similar trick to what we've done here, right? So once we get the result, we have to iterate through, and we have to manipulate that image tag. So let's do this. Let me just save off this name here because that's going to be important. And let's just copy this chunk of code here, just our iteration code. And yep, so we want to get an item. We don't need to pass in. This is doing the lookup. So we actually, this is going to be a lot faster because we don't have to pass in this information, right? So, but for each item, we do need this item.jp image nasty name, right? And then let's just dump that into image source. So let's do item.image URL equals this, and basically let's go ahead and create a sub method that will, a utility method that will kind of take this image tag, which is what we have here. Oh, you don't need to set that as a var. You have this image tag, which we have here, and we need to pass that to a method that extract out the source. And we actually have something that's already doing that. It's just wrapped in. It's just wrapped inside of this guy here, right? So if we break this out into its own method, we can reuse that regex function. So let's do this. Let's do get image source value, and then they'll pass in the image tag, right? And then from there we'll return this guy. So let's just pull this out, let's cut it, drop it here. So they're going to pass in the tag, it's going to do its thing, and it's going to extract the source. So for this guy we should return, and hopefully this doesn't break everything, return get image source value, and it too will pass in the image tag, right? So that should just put this back to where it was. And for this guy, this should be reusable. So now when we don't have to do an additional AJAX call, we can just pass in tags and then have that extracted. So that's going to be this guy here. So now if I do underscore get image source, and then just pass this guy. All right. Hopefully this works. Let's console write this out. So in order to write this out, I'm gonna have to, yeah, we just write it out. I was going to dump it into a local variable, but let's just write it out and say source equals, and then just call this guy twice. Right, and we can comment this out. I think we're past the neat look for transforming dictionary search result to JSON, clean JSON object result. Okay, so let's save this all. Everything's in services, right? So let's just push that one file up. And let's go here, hit refresh. All right, and let's go to the console. And that looks great. That actually looks fantastic. All right, so for the search results, we're getting what we need, right? So this is extracting that image tag and pushing that out. So that looks good. The other thing we want to double check is that all these guys kind of use that publishing, that get publishing. Wow, look at that. Because we use the same property name, our template automatically picked up that URL, and these are search results. That's actually pretty cool. That's impressive. All right, so we were using search results to now the search results is returning the actual image, so that's fine. And then this is our REST API query against a list. All right, so now we're good. So now what we want to do, we want to bring in the location in the summary, and I think we can call this part of the video done, because we kind of walk through how to extract that information. So this is our collection, right? We just do our ng repeat there, and this is all done for us because we used the same property name when we were mapping that. So now if we get down a little bit further, this JP summary does not make sense for search results, right? So we need to specify that managed property name. So let's go back to this guy. Let's drill down. This gets old after a while, but it is what it is. All right, so let's drill down here. And now what we need to do, we need to extract out summary. So that's going to be this guy here. And that's going to be our summary text. So just paste that. And we also need to extract out the location. So let's go back to this guy here. Where's our location? Location is going to be this guy. Copy this and paste it out. All right. And now let's just publish up our template. All right, and go here, hit refresh, and the hope is that we start to get location and summary for our search results, and we indeed do. Right. So as you can see, I mean, with this pattern, from a template perspective, outside of updating a few properties, we're pretty much good to go. And I'm telling you that the magic is that catalyst converter, the one that converts that nasty search results to a clean object orientation. And then, so your pattern as far as like, here's my object, here's my property, that still remains true from a template perspective. When it comes to your component, let's just look at the reason, because I don't think we touched the component. We didn't even touch the component for this part of the video because everything is passed through. And again, I mean, this is just one of those things where, if you have a clear separation of concern, you have, from a maintenance perspective, there's very little interaction here, right? All that business logic is in the services. All the display logic is in the template itself. And because we're using Angular, there's a lot of display tooling that we get out of the box using the API. Now, when it comes to services, there's a couple of things that I do want to highlight with what we're doing and why this works, right? What we're doing is, we have this guy here, and that's the one that's converting everything over, but it's doing that dynamically. So as we added properties, we didn't have to go and touch anything that says, okay, now I'm adding this property, make sure this property is added to this item object. We didn't have to do any of that. It just picks it up and dynamically loaded that, which is beautiful. The other piece is, here's the caveat. The caveat is in your display template, for most of us, we can live with it, right? But in our display template, we have to deal with these nasty manage property names. But we have a dynamic way of grabbing it, or we have a system on how we grab that, right? So we're just using the dev tools and drilling down to the respective area. And then I think that was the point of this video, is to show you I can drill down in this 10 times in one video. But, it's just one of those things that, as we're adding these properties, we can get the true name here. You don't really have to go digging. You just look at your result set, and then from your result set, you extract the property name, and then you use it. Right now, we really touch very lightly on managed properties and crawl properties. But, one of the things that you would notice that, I still have my filter in here for JP. So this is showing me all my JP crawl properties. But some of these managed properties, you would notice that, can you search within them? Can you, retrieve them? Can you refine them? Can you sort them? X, Y, Z. These are the ones that are given to us by default from the crawl. But we do have an opportunity to where we can map these to a custom one. And that custom mapping, I would highly recommend, as you kind of, this really depends on the organization. So it's hard for me to recommend a best practice, because this is one that it really, really depends. Some organizations do all of this mapping or custom managed properties at the tenant level or within the search admin configuration. In O365, that's the tenant level. And on-prem, that's going to be in central admin for the service application. Some organizations, because of their size, some of this is managed within the site collection level. And basically what that allows you to do, as the site collection admin, you have full control over how you want to map these and things along those lines. But when you're at the site collection admin, you're very limited, because now you are working with a bucket of reusable managed property values. So you're going to be kind of constrained in that regard, as far as like managed properties and the names and things along those lines, because you kind of have to use like some of the names that are given here. Now, there is one other feature that you can try to leverage, and I was playing around with this. Like, say for example, for this managed property, instead of using this long name to represent an image, you can create an alias for this image. And I think I tried this, and maybe I can try it now, but for some odd reason with the alias, I couldn't get it to work, or it doesn't seem like it was bringing the data back. But let me try. So I have an alias for this managed property of simply JP image, and maybe it had to be indexed first before that alias becomes available. Let me see here. JP image. So that's in my select property. Let's see in the result set if it's there. No, so still not there. And the funny thing about it is I don't get an error. Like, I don't even get an error stating that, I'm specifying a property that's invalid. It just doesn't, for the most part, it doesn't seem like it's bringing back any result set for that. So let me, yeah. I'm not seeing the result set for that based on the alias, but I'll do some digging into the alias piece. But this may be the saving grace, right? This may be, instead of dealing with the nasty managed property names here, or even worse, right? When you do like if you use one of their canned ones, which is like refinable string. So say, for example, if we need any of those crawl properties within the refiner, by default, are the managed property that's created based on that crawl property does not have the refine attribute on there. And those are read only, right? So it's not like we can go in there and modify and turn that on. So it doesn't have the refine property on there at the site collection level. So we have to dump those into these pre-canned, and I think you get like 50 or 100 of them or so, these pre-canned managed property names. And now you are, in your template, you're referring to like the job summary as an example as refinable string 03. And this is where the alias really comes into play and really, is significant in that regard because, if you're looking at this, you won't know what that represents. Like, what does that string represent? Is that the description? Is that the summary? What is that? So, so if once I have to do some read up on it and then test it out, but if the alias works as expected, where we can actually specify, that the alias in the select statement within the REST API, as well as reference it in the result source, then this becomes extremely, extremely clean. And now we have, it really starts to, outside of waiting for, the crawler to pick things up and all this other stuff, you really have a powerful solution just using REST API and leveraging search, and something that's will have some developer-friendly names within the template itself. All right, so that's it for this video. Again, we just barely scratched the surface on result sources. There's a lot of goodness there. There's a lot of manipulation that you can do, but the whole key behind that is how do we put all that CAN logic to look for job postings into a central location to where it's encapsulated. Leverage that, still using out of the box REST API search, and then from there map it into our properties so we can actually display data. And again, we showed how we can still keep our code extremely clean, still stick to our pattern as far as separation of concerns, where the template is only dealing with display information and logic. The services is doing all the heavy lifting with the business logic, and then within services there's also a data access layer to where we're trying to do reusable methods when and where possible, and then still keeping your controller extremely, extremely clean to where it's from a component standpoint, it's only dealing with pulling different pieces together, but really keeping the business logic or any logic to a very minimum, because that's what controllers are supposed to do. All right, so that's it for this video. I think for the next video, let's see where we are. For the next video, we want to be able to activate this guy here, right? So I think everything that we're doing is building up to this point to where, okay, now how do you bring in the search REST API? How do you get search working? And once that starts to work, how can you actually start using this to where we can start typing in, looking for jobs by manager and all this other good stuff. All right, so until the next video, take care, and I'll see you in the comment section. Any feedback, questions, suggestions are greatly appreciated.